We're going to have to add a new category at the end.
David's apologies.
Correct the record.
Mate, the show will double in length if you go with a David's apologies.
It's going to be like an avalanche of phone calls.
All these Tories will be calling you up this week going, oh, David.
David, I can read and write.
The presenting sponsor for Socially Democratic is Dunn Street. Dunn Street is a campaign agency that specialises in community organising. We only work with people and organisations who want to build power to make the world a better place. And if you want to create change in your world in 2026, then hit us up at dunnstreet.com.au. And a big welcome to our newest members of our Patreon community, Ryan Moore, Field alum, Deck Winterton, Ducksheather G, Rosie Elliott, Max Gross, and Rachel Smith. A thank you to all of those wonderful comrades for signing up to financially contribute and support the show. And as new members, you'll receive our Socially Democratic welcome pack that doesn't include Ballantine's chocolates or Patra orange juice, PATRA. That is a reference to a World of Sport segment from the 1980s that some people will not get. But also to those guys, please make sure you check your Patreon inbox for a message from our producer in terms of getting your details so we can send that stuff out to you. And if you haven't already and you want to support the show, then join our Patreon community. And in doing so, you get to ask mailbag questions and submit your categories for our monthly episodes of the Feeney Files. Plus, you get first dibs on tickets for live shows, and we're planning on doing a bunch of live shows in 2026. So to join, make sure you click on the link in the show notes and become a subscribed member of our Socially Democratic Patreon community. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by Maurice Blackburn Lawyers. For over a century, Maurice Blackburn has stood up for fairness, championing the rights of everyday Australians and shaping landmark legal reforms. Today, they're harnessing new technologies to make justice more accessible, more efficient, and more responsive to the needs of modern Australia. All right, let's get on with today's episode. We are taping this one on a Tuesday morning on the lands of the Wurundjeri people. This is our first Feeney Files with Jessie McCrone for the 2026 season of Socially Democratic. And that means it's great to welcome my two regular monthly co-hosts. She is the former Deputy Chief of Staff to the Premier, Dan Andrews, and now a Managing Partner at FMRS Advisory, Jessie McCrone. Welcome back. Happy New Year.
It feels like so long since I've seen you, Stephen, so it's good to be back.
And he is the former State Secretary, former Senator, former member of the House of Representatives, and now a doctor. Dr. David Ian Feeney, welcome back to Social Democratic.
Woohoo! Happy 2026. Happy New Year.
Yeah. So,
and great to have you kids back in Australia.
It's just wonderful to be back. Glorious Melbourne summer's day here.
It is.
Loving these overnight lows as well. Big fan of that. Lots to talk about since we last spoke. We've had a news poll. Well, it's been a lot of polling being dropped actually, but in particular, we've got one news poll that was conducted sort of on the 12th to the 15th of January. Two-party preferred, Labor 55, Coalition 45. Take those numbers any day. But Labor's primary fell from 36 to 32 points. The Coalition fell from 24 to 21. One Nation up from 15 to 22 points. Green steady, others steady. So I guess the two significant numbers to drop out of this particular poll was the PM's approval rating fell to -11, and how much of the government's response to the Bondi massacre impacted those numbers. We've seen a massive increase in One Nation's primary, up from 15 to 22%, thus overtaking the Coalition, I think, for the first time in polling history. So I guess there are three topics I want to sort of talk to you guys about today. One is the Bondi massacre of 15 Jewish Australians. Two, the rise in One Nation's numbers and what's driving this. And three, the response by the Coalition to their numbers. Obviously, this week in Parliament, they're sitting this week in Parliament, there's a lot of talk about a challenge to the leadership of Susan Ley. And obviously, we'll do categories at the end. We've got a whole bunch sent in from our Patreon listeners, which I'm looking forward to getting to. But let's go to the Bondi response first of all. Since we last spoke in December, where we dedicated a whole episode to a reflection of the left's response to anti-Semitism. We got a lot of feedback from our listeners, mostly positive. And there's a lot of people who have emailed me, and I do want to write back to you all. I'm just trying to take the time to actually give you considered responses. But since then, I mean, we recorded that in the week following the massacre. The government has focused a lot of their energy in the response to the massacre, including recalling Parliament to vote on legislation to tighten our gun laws and to have stronger hate crime provisions. They called a National Day of Mourning a month after the attack, and eventually called a Royal Commission into investigating into anti-Semitism following, I guess, pressure from the wider community. Jessie, if you can put your old government hat on, in particular crisis response, which the Andrews government had to suffer from time to time. No government is immune from that. Would you have done anything differently in terms of how the government handled the response to the Bondi terror attack in the weeks following?
I think the simple answer to that is yes. And I think that the government now, upon reflection, would also answer yes, they would have done things differently had they had their time again. I think it's clear the government has done a lot of things in response. They've, as you've mentioned, they've tightened gun laws and hate crime, or they're attempting to tighten gun and hate crime laws. They've had the National Day of Mourning. They've agreed to a Royal Commission. Activity isn't the issue, I think, on this one. It's how it happened and the sequencing and how the response felt. And politics a lot is about feeling and people's emotional responses to things. And from a government management perspective, this felt very delayed and reactive. There was a lot of criticism in the government for the opposition, for people like Josh Frydenberg, for people like Susan Ley, for politicising this terror attack. I think my view is that, unfortunately, the Labor government looked like that they were acting very politically in response to the attack. I think both sides of politics were acting in a very political way to what was essentially a crisis or an emergency. And in a time of a crisis and emergency, a community has had something unexpected happen. Something feels uncontrolled. Something feels like that no one feels safe, or like what they expected to happen has happened. So what is important for a leader or a government to do in those circumstances? Be it a bushfire, be it a terrorist attack, be it something like Bondi, which was a terrorist attack. What people are looking for is clear leadership, visible empathy, and a believable plan. And I don't know that the government nailed it on any one of those three immediately. So in a major bushfire, you might have a premier come out and sort of talk about what they're doing, empathise heavily with those people impacted, and create a believable plan about what happens next in recovery. And I really think those elements were missing from the response from government. They didn't set the tone early about the impact this has on the Jewish community and the broader issue of anti-Semitism. I don't think that the government great was standing with the Jewish community, and I talked a little bit in the last podcast about the symbolism of that. I think I would have set the tone a little bit more strongly at the start. And again, this is my communications advice, quite aside from the fact that I think there is a moral imperative to do these things. This is more my analysis of the communications strategy. I think they should have announced the Royal Commission or a response like that straight away. Whether it specifically was a Royal Commission, I do think there needed to be something to demonstrate the government were clearly focused on the victims and dealing with the anti-Semitism element of this, and then looking like the proper incident response plan about the security review, the tightening of gun laws, all of those things that I think are good that the government has done. I think the sequencing has not been amazing. I think also the National Day of Mourning I would have announced early as well as part of that standing with the Jewish community. So I think generally a lot of activity. I don't know the sequencing has been great. The government has looked wrong-footed and not necessarily like they had a clear plan to respond to it.
The Royal Commission component of the response was one of the things that seemed like the government were slow to respond. And David, can you explain to me the government's initial argument that the Royal Commission would platform hate speech? That was one of the reasons why they said, look, I don't think we should do a Royal Commission at a federal level, but we've got one in New South Wales. But one of the purposes of an inquiry of this nature is to give victims a chance to be heard. And one of the things the Jewish community has been saying privately for 2 years now is that no one's listening to us, that we're worried that something may happen. And then obviously we had Bondi. I mean, surely this is a good thing now to have a commission where we can hear from the victims and what their lived experience is. Why do you think they took so long to move on that?
Well, we discussed in the last episode, some of the context that surrounds the terrorist incident at Bondi, and that context is everything. And it's what made this dreadful event so different in a management issue, why it's so different to a fire, why it's so different to any other kind of terrorist event. And that's because I think when the government announced its response in terms of gun law reform and in terms of hate speech laws, it was very quickly deemed to be inadequate to this context and this situation, because here you were dealing with a wounded and aggrieved community for whom that context was everything, and that meant they were angry at the government. They weren't just wounded like victims of a bushfire. They weren't just in distress like victims of a terrorist attack. They were also angry and holding the government culpable. And that changes everything, I think. And we saw the opposition, and we'll perhaps come back to this because I think it was an error on their part, but we saw the opposition sense that mood. You know, I guess they heard the boos at Bondi and blah, 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 and they went in to the attack. And I don't include Josh Frydenberg in this. His was a very emotional and I perceived it to be a more Jewish community response. But people like John Howard and Susan Ley were acting in a far more premeditated and calibrated way, and they responded in a way that must have taken the government by surprise when they were saying things like the Prime Minister has blood on his hands, which is a very dramatic thing to accuse a Prime Minister of in the aftermath of a terrorist attack. But they said it, and so they didn't strive to join a bipartisan spirit of post-terrorist, trauma. They went in for the kill, and that was and that mood was perhaps set in part by the anger of the Jewish community, but they went for it, and so that meant everything was different. The government. I don't know why the government didn't go for a Royal Commission, but I'm happy to hazard a guess because I've obviously thought about that question. And I think the answer is because the way the government designed its original inquiry, it was being run by a highly regarded and very professional public servant, veteran of the national security apparatus, Dennis Richardson, former ambassador, former secretary of the Department of Defence, yada, yada, yada. And he was going to conduct an inquiry into our intelligence agencies, our security agencies, how they were coordinated. It was very technical. And it was going to go to those questions of coordination and intelligence. And by its nature, it was going to be a secret deliberation because obviously a lot of those matters are, for good reason, top secret. And that, from the government's perspective, would have produced a report that was useful and not part of the political debate. And what everybody else wanted was a Royal Commission because they wanted a more broad-ranging discussion. And I think, the enthusiasm of News Limited for a Royal Commission, let alone, the Jewish community, the coalition, various categories of esteemed persons, they all wanted a much bigger and broader discussion. And if you have a bigger and broader discussion about anti-Semitism, what are you going to have? You're going to have a discussion about Islamist the Islamic community and Islamist extremism, about Islamist preachers. You're going to have a conversation about universities. You're going to have a discussion about our creatives and how they are doxing people and censoring people and deplatforming people. And suddenly the government's going to find itself having a big conversation across every corner of our community. And as we sort of touched on in our last podcast, the left will be right in the gun in that conversation by definition. Whether you think that's a conversation the country needs or not, I think the government and its ministers concluded that why are we going to volunteer for that? Why are we going to volunteer for a Royal Commission over 12 months that excoriates the cultural left, the political left, the rallies, the yada yadas, the universities? It's going to be big, it's unmanageable, it's going to offend huge audiences. We're in government, why are we going to do that? And of course, for precisely those reasons, because, there are lots of, people who are concerned about those issues. There are culture wars, there are culture warriors. For a whole plethora of reasons, there was quite a big community of people who want exactly that conversation. Now, I guess the way the story ends is that the pressure mounted, the conversation didn't change. Albo tried to stare it down and wear it out, but it was the slow news part of the annual cycle, and every day the story was the same, and they kept the story fresh by having new luminaries, new sports stars, new retired generals, new former governors general, new judges coming out calling for a Royal Commission, and eventually Albo thought, well, bugger this, I've got to cop it, and because I can't turn the channel. And so I think that's where we got, and I think those were the underpinnings of the rival forces in that debate.
I'd just like to say two things to that. The first is I don't agree that this emergency was tangibly different to the response you would have for any other emergency. I think the difference is the context was not clear to the government. I think that in most emergencies, governments get very quickly the context in which they're operating. For instance, the bushfires over summer here, there was a debate about CFA funding, and the opposition tried to peddle misinformation about whether they had been funded to an appropriate level. And the government was very conscious of that in their response. I think the challenge here is the government was not conscious of the context because they haven't been great at that context for the whole time. So I don't necessarily think that the emergency was inherently different. I think the government missed a massive part of the context.
Yeah, I think we're saying the same thing, which is, the government arrived at this whole incident embarrassed, didn't it?
Indeed. The second thing I would say about the Royal Commission response, and I agree with most of what David is saying, I think the other thing I would just add is the context of the referendum from the last term. I think the government and the Prime Minister in particular is very aware of the criticism that the government spent a lot of time talking about a referendum instead of other things. And this term of government, they are far more conscious of spending time on an issue that is not the bread and butter things that they want to talk to the community about.
Yeah, but I don't think that's right, because the Royal Commission's going to give them all sorts of issues. It's going to give them immigration policy, university policy.
No. I would add to that.
Free speech. I'm being sarcastic. This Royal Commission is going to cough up a lot of issues.
I think it is probably it's probably going to be a longer distraction than the referendum was. Yeah. So I would just add whether they thought it was a good idea or not, and obviously the Prime Minister thought there was a moral responsibility to have the referendum. So I'm not necessarily saying that he had a different view about examining anti-Semitism, but the advice to this government since the election and before the election was don't spend your time on things that are not you pushing your own message. And I just think that has informed their thinking on a Royal Commission.
Yeah, well, if you're not interested in the Royal Commission, don't worry, the Royal Commission's going to be interested in you. Yeah. In what you say and how you say it and where you go to uni and what your lecturer's up to, and there's a lot of work to be done.
Jesse, David sort of touched on the politicisation of the tragedy. What did you make of I would call it the hypocrisy of the coalition, who turned up to the beach throughout the weeks following the attack and demanding the government outlaw hate speech. But like they have done before, when it comes to voting on this stuff, they eventually go missing. Were you surprised by that?
No, it's much worse than that. It's much worse than that. They tell the Prime Minister he has blood on his hands. They insist that Parliament be recalled. They say the government's response is completely inadequate, and then they get called back to Parliament. They say too little, too late, but we're going back to Parliament. They get back to Parliament and faint with excitement and can't make a decision and fall apart. They have been so breathtakingly hopeless that they have made a government that was embarrassed look strong and recover its poise. The only thing Labor can count on is that there's a political force in this country more incompetent than them, and it's the coalition.
The fact that Tony Burke can, on the one hand, say, this would platform hate speech, but then come out of the first week of Parliament calling the opposition a hypocrite after announcing it is a fundamental failure for the opposition there. That is remarkable. I agree with everything David just said. I think that there are a couple of reasons for why it's happened. The first is, and I think David touched about this when we were talking about Josh Frydenberg. Josh Frydenberg, when speaking at Bondi, was not speaking as a strategist for the Liberal Party.
Quite right.
He was speaking as an advocate for the Jewish community. Whether that also precipitates a bunch of other plans he has for his future, like that aside, and I think that Susan Ley and others in the leadership team took that as this should be our political response and didn't necessarily think about whether the Liberal Party, which has rejected these kind of hate speech reforms in the past, actually supported them. And I think that goes to the second thing I would say about this, which is oppositions or governments strategy can only be as good as united as they are. You can have the best strategy in the world, but if you don't have the capacity to enforce it or have your backbench buy into it, the strategy is going to fail. And I think that this is an example, which we'll talk about later, is if she had more support in her party room, she could have pushed this strategy through, which is call on the government to do something and then support them while they're doing it and claim victory for the outcome. She was hobbled by her own party room on this. One, because either she never checked or had any sense about where they stood on it, or two, it's part of the leadership battle playing out in a different field. But it was an absolute disaster.
I mean, she issues blood-curdling accusations against the Prime Minister, pulls her sword out, charges down the hill, and then at the foot of the hill faints. I mean, it could not be worse.
No, absolutely.
If there is a bullet heading towards the Labor Party, she's going to jump up, dive in front of it and take it.
But you assume when setting this strategy of calling for something, she thought that they were going to vote for it. Like, you assume.
But Jesse, for the folks that are playing along at home, can you just
insist that Parliament be recalled early so that I cannot talk about these issues but concentrate on my leadership and how the coalition doesn't belong together.
I guess what I want to unpack for our listeners is to get a sense of, and my follow-up question was to David about the Greens, and I better on this stuff either, is that both the Greens and the Libs have problematic issues with hate speech legislation for different reasons. Can you
different reasons?
So what? Yeah.
Oh, right. So that's sort of your question. Yeah. Okay. So I like the Libs. The Libs want to protect certain types of people from hate speech and not others. It's basically, I think when you've got hate speech right is when the left and the right are both like, oh, I really want hate speech for these things, but these other things should be allowed to be said. And I think Labor have actually probably nailed it.
Regulating speech is a diabolical thing to try and do.
It is, but both the hard left and the hard right have called for it in this situation.
Sure. But there are issues of consequence around regulating speech.
There are. There absolutely are. And I would say the fact that the hard left and the hard right are both happy with parts of it and not other parts of it suggests maybe the government's got it pretty right.
Totalitarians don't find the issue quite as problematic as I might have made out. I guess you're right. The hard right and the Greens are very comfortable regulating speech.
It's that horseshoe. Or maybe it's a good time to talk about totalitarianism and just pivot to One Nation and their rise in the polls. Barnaby Joyce, just a bit of backtrack. Barnaby Joyce joined One Nation on December the 8th. Actually, no, why did I say it that way? I want to say it that way. The election, on election day.
You made it sound really significant.
Yeah, I did, didn't I? Well, I sort of want to kind of say, how did we get here? Because on election day, the primary vote for One Nation was 7.4%. That's an actual poll. That's Australians physically walking to the local primary school and casting a ballot, right? 7.4%. And those numbers basically held up all the way through to September last year. It's the first time in a news poll that they got double figures. They got 13% in a news poll. Barnaby Joyce joins One Nation on the 8th of December. I don't know if that's got an impact. I'm interested in people's thoughts. And then in January, in this most recent news poll, they're now at 22%. And a lot of the other national polls are similar as well. I think Redbridge has them even higher. Also noting there's a rumour now that Alec Antich is potentially joining One Nation as well. Didn't sit in the Liberal caucus room. It was reported this morning. Anyway.
You might have said this, but Corey Bernardi, I think, today as well.
Oh, wow. Okay, it's like this is trade season. Like everyone's jumping teams. Anyway, Jessie, who should be more worried about these numbers, us or the coalition?
Like I'd say right now, Barnaby Joyce is walking around like he is a god, because you are right. Like he has switched teams and suddenly One Nation have the biggest polling results they've ever had, and looking like he is pretty impressed with himself at this point. I don't think correlation is causation in this case, but if I were him, I would be making the argument. Who should be worried? I think Labor should be worried about it because there is a massive fluctuation happening within the right, and none of those votes are coming to us. There are a bunch of people who think the opposition are a disaster, and for all those reasons that David just outlined minutes ago, they are. And our poll is still sitting below our result from the election. So I'm a little bit worried about that there is just whole group of people that will never vote for Labor, and they're just moving within the right. So there's that. But broadly, I think it's a much bigger problem for the coalition. I think that if we look back in Labor's spotted history of splits and that sort of thing, it doesn't go well for you.
No. David, I'm interested in getting a sense from you about how durable these numbers are for One Nation. I mean, we've seen numbers like these in Queensland state polls in the past, but this is new territory for them at a federal level. I mean, is this sort of, we've seen and we've talked about this in the show over the last 12 months, the rise of the far right in Western democracies in Europe and obviously in the United States. Are we at this moment where this is now the genuine rise of the far right in Australian politics, with these numbers being higher than the coalitions?
Yes, I've obviously contemplated that question myself, and I think there's really two stories here. The first is the one you've alluded to, which is that One Nation got 7%. What's changed since then? Well, the most significant thing that's changed since then is the sort of obvious decay of the coalition, so that it grabs the lead, 3 nights in 7, if not 4 nights in 7, and Australians are just pulverised with news about how hopeless they are. And so that sort of collapse in standing means that Conservative voters and I've said this before, are parking their vote with One Nation. What we haven't seen since the last election is One Nation find itself a new voice. We haven't seen it campaigning. We haven't seen new messaging. We haven't seen an online campaign. We haven't seen it spending money. So this is not the fruit of One Nation's labours. except insofar as they recruited Barnaby, and that may have given them more profile, something of a boost amongst those who find Barnaby interesting, which, to be fair, included Q&A 4 nights in 10. So, he's had his fans around the place.
Is he 12% of the vote? That's remarkable.
No. But there is something else going on, I think. And, when we look at, again, as you touched on, Steve, and when we look at, the United States, the United Kingdom, Western Europe, we do see the rise of the right. We haven't seen that happen in Australia. And when I contemplate that question, I think the real reason we've not seen that happen in Australia is not for want of issues or want of electoral material. It's because the far right in this country have never had a leader worthy of the title. It's been a potpourri of amateurs and hysterics. Since One Nation was formed, I think 1996, it has successfully elected 30 people to state and federal parliaments, and most of those left the party within months. And why? Because they were deranged, their party's deranged, their totalitarian leader is deranged. They've never successfully mounted a message. They've never had a leader who could credibly debate issues of consequence. They're just a bit of cheap, primitive sloganeering is the best they've ever done. And so they've not had a Farage, God forbid a Trump, a Le Pen. They've never had right wing thought leaders like that you find in the podcast ecosystem in the United States and elsewhere. They don't have
Corey Bernardi will be very sad to hear you say that.
They don't have erudite academics. So they've got everything except the talent. There are certainly the issues in this country. There are anxieties in this country. Perhaps some of those were brought to the fore in the aftermath of Bondi. Some of them have been around for a while. I think you've got these, three stooges, or at least for the minute, two stooges leading the far right in this country, who are a mile wide and an inch deep. And can't make an argument of consequence about anything anywhere, but they do sit astride a sort of a barely coherent policy offering of anger and grievance. And where does that come from? Well, maybe we are increasingly part of a global ecosystem, at least some of us are. And so some Australians are being influenced by the stuff they're listening and watching that comes from other places. They're watching Michigan, they're watching ICE, they're watching the United Kingdom, they're watching, God knows, maybe there is some of that is seeping into our universe, and so that there is a hard right vote in this country. They don't know where to go, they don't have a leader, they're incoherent. And the coalition is not in any kind of shape. Well, there is no coalition. The Liberal and National parties are not in any kind of shape to find it, lead it, galvanise it. And you've got the two stooges in One Nation bumbling around, trying to speak to it and being its default, choice. But they haven't got the talent to build it and lead it anywhere important, in my view.
And once again, David puts himself forward as a possible candidate for this role.
When election time comes around, these One Nation legions will melt away and vote Liberal or National, I think, for the most part. One Nation is the people who should be most worried about One Nation, of course, are Queensland and regional New South Wales country MPs. And that's where you see the frisson in Canberra.
Yeah, and I would add to that, it's not that this should be ignored. This is a significant moment in the rise of the polling for One Nation, but we are also talking about a team entirely untested by proper scrutiny, all of those things that happen during a campaign. I would describe all of this as less of a rise of the far right or the rise of the right in Australia as more of a splintering and a fracturing of the Conservatives and the Libertarians that got together to stop Labor and the whole coalition is falling apart. And you will end up with half of the coalition voters who would never, ever vote One Nation, and a bunch of coalition voters that will never, ever vote Teal. And now they're kind of quite swiftly at the moment, moving away from each other.
And I think building on that point, the salad days of the global right seem to be over, and the sort of Trump coalition is splintering. I mean, once upon a time, there was quite a broad coalition on the centre-right that were pointing at the Democrats and saying, what an irrelevant bunch of woke activists you are, choose your pronouns, we're going to get on with running America. Well, those salad days are over. We're now seeing, the Nick Fuentes and the Candace Owens of this world, Tucker, sprouting, the most insane libertarian and anti-Semitic messages into the American right. Traditional Republicans are recoiling from that. Trump MAGA, there's a battle for the heart and soul of MAGA, and that's spilling out in. So the right are not the cohesive ideological entity they may have appeared to have been a year ago, and I think we're going to see that sneak and creep into Australian politics in the form of deranged coalition. I've got to stop saying that. Deranged Liberal and National MPs who, like me, watch too many YouTube videos, and who find themselves on different sides of irrelevant arguments inside the right about free speech and, Israel and God only knows what else. And so they're just going to keep wandering deeper into this rabbit hole powered by Sky at Night. And that spells, and that's why the free speech debate is almost tailor-made cocktail for them to drink just before they die, because that free speech argument is going to paralyse them because they've got this Second Amendment mindset, thanks to YouTube, about the role of free speech.
And to build on that as well, in terms of this global right, it's been interesting to observe far-right parties, particularly in Europe, distance themselves from Trump, particularly ones that are in leadership positions like in Italy, because
Poilievre in Canada. Do you remember poor old Poilievre? He measuring up the curtains and choosing his cabinet when a meteor from the sky called Donald Trump blew him to pieces.
And we talked about it here in Australia leading up to the May election as well last year. But now that this attack on Greenland, Europe, you're finding far right political actors in Europe who normally are sort of European collective skeptics now defending Europe against the United States and against Trump and their incursion into the sovereignty of Europe. It's been fascinating to watch. So this whole unity ticket is just completely unraveling, which I'm loving every minute of.
I do tend to think the Italian Prime Minister has been the most deft at sort of managing I can think that Trump has done a good job of this and a terrible job of that. I think her common sense messaging around that has been she's a pretty impressive communicator. She's a fascist.
The other thing she's done really well, unlike many of her compatriots, is she's stuck by Ukraine. Yeah. And held with European solidarity on that question, which sets her apart from Orban in Hungary and others. So, it's who'd have thought we'd say nice things about Giorgia Meloni, but there it is.
I just think she's actually picking a pathway through this that's quite elegant to watch.
I agree.
Okay, let's talk about the elephant in the room, which is the Liberal Party. Hashtag LibSpill.
When you say elephant, it's all we've talked about for the last 40 minutes.
But let's really get into it now. Let's actually gloves off. This is ice hockey.
Ride that elephant.
Throw the gloves on the ground and let's start wailing away at the Tories. So obviously, Liberal leader Susan Ley could face a spill motion this week, or it could be next week. Who knows? Depending on whether the Conservative backers of Angus Taylor feel that they've got enough numbers to mount a successful challenge. Last week, it appears that him and Andrew Hastie had a conversation, and Hastie's withdrawn from the contest because I think it seems like they were both fighting over similar votes in the caucus. To you, David, you have had some experience in these leadership battles.
I've watched lots of Liberal Party leadership battles from across the way. That's true.
People at home are going, some
Observer. Mostly an observer for spills. That's how they
some
describe David.
experience. Is
First time
Susan lit?
First time caller, long time listener.
So, I mean, listeners have now heard me give my gentle description of Susan Ley in the aftermath of Bondi. But, let's just remember how bad it got. So, Albo called a National Day of Mourning. The coalition decided that the National Day of Mourning was the day they would announce to the world the coalition was ending, which was just a spectacularly appalling thing for them to do.
It was.
But not perhaps in their councils they thought, that was in poor taste, but we can do better than that. So they then used the funeral of one of their former colleagues as an opportunity to have a highly publicised leadership powwow, so that Katie Allen's funeral stopped being about her and started to become about the man with the hair and Hasty having a powwow. I thought that was in incredibly poor taste. And I, if that had happened on our side, I can just imagine how you'd get excoriated. But in any event, the Tories muster at their Anglican church and have a leadership powwow over the coffin. I mean, I thought it was appalling optics. And then, of course, climb into Parliament. And I was thinking about this the other. To be honest, the Liberal leadership battle, I'm bored. I'm just bored. I see the articles in the paper. It comes on the television, and I've lost interest. Like, okay,
why? Why? Because I feel the same. Why, David?
Because it's who cares? It's hopeless.
Irrelevant to our future plans for the country.
It was interesting for the first 6 months, but now,
it's just rolled on and on. Like, we all knew Susan wasn't going to last the term. And we're all just to be like, get on with it.
It's just never ending. Nothing's happening. I don't know. So, yes, the right and the left and, Liberals I've never heard of talking to other Liberals I've never heard of, and the East, West, North faction negotiating with the Who Gives a Shit faction. I don't care. I don't care. What I do care about is the fact that the government, the salad days roll on, and for Albo and the government, what an extraordinary spectacle as they watch, from their 94 seats or whatever it is, this handful of fools in front of them scrimmage in the most inelegant way. It goes, I think, to something I've said now on this show for years, and that is that the key issue, particularly for the Liberal Party, is talent. They're just not good at it. They're amateurs. We're watching stupid people with a lack of experience. They're not good at politics. Not many of them are good at anything else. And they're flummoxing around with all the talent of a fresher student politician. These people are making their first mistake in politics when most of us did that at 18. And they're just not good at it. And worse than that, Stephen, they're not good entertainment either.
You heard it first, folks. David made mistakes in student politics when he was 18.
I didn't mention I was
Jessie, despite how bored we are,
I don't know what to add to that.
Well, despite about how bored we are by all this, I am interested in your thoughts about. Obviously, there was an internal debate about was it going to be Angus Taylor or Andrew Hastie to be the person that challenged from notionally the whatever faction they represent. Who worries you more?
I genuinely, to some extent, cannot tell them apart. Like,
they're both so good.
One of them's got great hair. Great hair.
Which one has great hair?
He was the guy. He was the treasurer who.
Taylor's got good hair.
He was the treasurer who presided over the first election where the coalition lost its economic credentials. He's a wizard. He's a political wizard.
Yeah, look,
He's got
I
grey
personally
hair.
think Albie Schultz's son should have won that pre-selection and the Liberal Party would be in a much better position had that been what happened. But that isn't what happened. We got Angus Taylor. When I say I can't tell them apart, I don't think that they're offering massively different things. I think that they are. This is the reason they haven't rolled Susan yet, is because they can't decide which clone to go with.
Yeah, you are being so rude here to rich white males. We all look the same. It's like all Asians look the same. All rich white males look the same. I'm not copying it. It's rude.
And I'm not making comments about why either of you might be particularly interested in the voluptuousness of the hair.
One of them is speaking to a rowing club in Western Australia, and the other one is appealing to an old city club in Sydney. If you can't see the difference, you don't know your demographics. And a part,
of some description.
Yeah, like they're completely different crowds. Well, they didn't even go to the same school.
The only thing I would say is I do tend to agree with David on the economic credentials. Maybe they have a better chance with Hastie.
Well, Hastie hasn't got any economic credentials.
Exactly.
That makes him the better choice.
Yeah, so maybe they've got a better chance of redefining their economic credentials under him.
Yeah.
For all of David's scorning of the talent that is in the Liberal Party, we've always said that politics is Hollywood for ugly people. The Liberal Party, they've got two good-looking blokes there. Like, that's one thing.
But as soon as they start speaking, Stephen, it's like, you can't tell if they're an idiot, so don't say anything and confirm the suspicion. Like, just the best thing those two blokes can do is go into Parliament and never say a word.
Yeah, and I would say there's a lot of criticism of the Labor Party and where we draw our politicians from and whether there's too many trade unionists and there's too many, lawyers or former staffers. I'll tell you what, Liberal Party has to stop getting failed business people and failed coppers. Like, they just really do need to broaden the base.
I think an intelligence test is more critical than any of their demographic tests.
The only other question I wanted to ask you was sort of Susan Lay's offered to reunite the coalition this week, but only if 3 senators who cross the floor remain on the backbench for 6 months. So she's got the statute of limitations there. How much leverage does Susan Lay actually have at this time to be demanding these things?
I want to rant again. So the coalition comes to an end, and what's the first thing that happens? All of those hopeless gnats lose their positions as shadow ministers, and all of their staffers are flung into the abyss. And 5 minutes later, the National Party walk out of their room, blinking into the sunlight and say, oh, shit, didn't realise I was going to get a pay cut out of this.
I'm not going to have a white car anymore.
Our principled stand against the coalition needs to come to an end. Let's start talking to Susan again. Oh, we can't talk to Susan. We said we wouldn't go back into coalition while she was leader. Junk that, mate. My salary. Have you seen what's happened to my salary? So now they're back at the negotiating table looking like the amateurs they are. And what's their like? Well, their position is, well, when we're in shadow cabinet, we shouldn't have to stick to what cabinet says. Like, well, listen, I mean, I hope she gives in on that, because that will just formalise the amateurish behaviour of these clowns. Like, if we are going to take the politics of our Commonwealth seriously, we need an opposition that can read and write and walk and chew gum at the same time. And like these guys, where's my car? Oh my God, I resigned. I forgot. I lost my car. Where are my staffers? What's happened to my salary? Quick, abandon our principles and start talking to Susan. They just beyond recovery.
I'm going to take that as Feeney's filibuster for this episode.
Fair enough.
And with that, thank you, David. Jessie.
I really interrupted Jessie.
It's now time for your communication breakdown, where you do a bit of analysis of good or bad comms from the month.
Yeah, I'm a little worried that David's going to get overly excited at my communications breakdown and it's going to set him off again, because mine is about Susan Lay.
Listen.
So I think it's really important when doing communications, you've got to think about your audience and what you're trying to achieve. And I think this is one of the things that Susan has been particularly bad at. She is right now at a critical point where she's just trying to maintain her leadership. Like that is her number one objective at the moment. And when you see some of the messaging, that is coming out from the people around her, either her office or her Praetorian Guard, it's not great. Like, You are right, David. The fact that there was a weird meeting deciding the leadership before Katie Allen's funeral was a disgrace. Absolutely. But given the general type of person that is in the Liberal Party room, having a crack at them on background for having a meeting at a female MP's funeral against the female leader and really couching it around a sexism frame, which it absolutely is. Like, do not get me wrong, the frame is truthful. I just don't think it's going to win any of the votes in the party room that they are looking for. Similarly, having a crack about the Australian's terrible article about how you wouldn't marry Susan Ley, and it's a disgrace, and the fact that the Australian never published it is ridiculous.
Oh, I didn't see that.
But her office using it to background about the terrible treatment and the way that she's been treated as a woman, both to her caucus and to the gallery, I think sort of misses the kind of people she wants to vote for her in a party room. And they don't like that kind of messaging. And I also think, given Susan again defended the treatment of Julia Gillard on the 10th anniversary of the misogyny speech, I don't know that she has a particularly strong position to stand on when it comes to defending female leaders and how they're being treated by the media. So I think that while I agree that all of the accusations about she's being treated differently because she's a woman are totally accurate, I also think she is speaking to a caucus that will not respond well to that messaging. So that is my comms advice to Susan Ley. I don't think this is going to be helpful to you.
I don't know how you talk to that caucus though, Jessie. I mean, hieroglyphs? I mean, what do you do? I mean, smoke signals? What do you send in translators?
Well, it turns out it's WhatsApp, David.
Bang rocks together and move over there.
I just don't think appealing to their sense about sexism is the way to get the Liberal Party MPs to vote for you. But
if Jessie, she was hypothetically speaking to refine that message so that they heard everything they wanted to hear, she would simultaneously lose the people of Australia, wouldn't she?
I think that there's a way to do both.
The aforementioned rowing club in Western Australia and the pastoralist club in Sydney.
I think there's a way to do both. Like, I think her leadership was terminal the day she got it. So it's a hard hoe to row. So
yeah.
Okay, I think it's time for categories. And we, as usual, do Tory of the Typewriter or Tree Tory of the Typewriter, the Mel Meninga I'm in over my head award, probably unanswerable questions, and the Alexander Downer Political Judgment Award. We've actually got a bunch sent in from our Patreon subscribers. And if you also want to send through for our monthly episodes of the Feeney Files, your nominations, then join our Patreon community, links in the show notes. Let's start with, and I just want to state beforehand, if we don't get Sam Groth in one of these categories, I'm going to be really disappointed. So I'm asking you guys to do some heavy lifting here. But starting with Tory with the Typewriter, David, you've got a nomination for us.
I do. It's that newspaper of record, The Australian, and Nick Cater wrote an article which I just thought needed to be preserved. It was written on the 6th of January, and it's entitled Anthony Albanese's Blind Spot, How the Prime Minister Missed His Chance to Confront the Left's New Antisemitism. And what Nick essentially does here is say that Albo is uniquely poorly placed to deal with this issue because he's such a wokester, an inner city wokester. And I feel like he's got Albo confused with AOC in the United States. He don't know about the bloke he's talking about.
No.
It was such a magnificent mischaracterization of Albo, the sort of working class, grounded in working class culture, loathes the wokester, spent his whole life fighting against the Greens. I came away from this article saying, wow, like they, in pointing out his flaws, they've actually reminded me of his strengths. And isn't it interesting how little they know about the bloke after all this time? Like they still don't understand
they don't.
their adversary. So Nick gets my trophy this week.
I think that there should be a rule around Tory with a typewriter that anyone that considers it a good thing shouldn't be able to receive it. Like I think Nick would be thrilled to hear that he was a Tory with a typewriter. That's his objective.
Well, he literally is a Tory, and they gave him a typewriter.
Yeah, well, there is that. Yeah.
Whereas I think we're trying to pick out people who are hidden Tories who have a typewriter.
Well, I do keep picking on the Australian, and to be fair to the Australian, for a lot of them, they long forgot trying to pretend to be journalists.
That's true.
That is true. We have two other nominations for the Tory with the typewriter this week. One from Gus. Gus writes, it's a little dated, but Chip Legrand, in the middle of his endless campaign against the government, being forced to admit that even his editor was excited about the Metro Tunnel back at the end of November. And I actually went and read the article. He actually says that, how the editor was running around the office, cock-a-hoop, so excited about how Melbourne Metro was going to open. Oh, far out.
Well, just apropos that, I watched Media Watch last night. I don't know why. It's getting worse. But anyway, I watched Media Watch where they were complaining bitterly about how Channel 7 News was just full of this giant promo for the tunnel. And, journalists were doing their reports from different stations and just advertising the shit out of it. And he was criticising them for taking a sponsorship from the Metro Tunnel Authority. And I was looking at this scandal thinking, you go. That's an excellent bit of sponsorship. That, in my previous life as director of strategy, I'd have given myself a little bronze star for that. That's a quality bit of communications right there. So someone's on the ball.
And the last nomination for Tory with a typewriter, it's actually Tory with a typewriter. It's from Luca. And he says the PM's interview on the ABC with David Spears, it would have been on Insiders, I'm assuming. He says there was a great moment during the interview where Albo was listing off all of the new legislative changes that would be coming into effect early in 2026, childcare announcements, Medicare hotline, $25 medicines, etc. And David Spears shrugs that off and tries for the next 5 minutes to get a soundbite from the Prime Minister about Trump's NATO troop comments. And then the panel after the interview with the Prime Minister spend a considerable amount of time discussing Albo's comment about Trump instead of the actual material changes in policy coming up that are already implemented. I don't know. And Luca goes on to say, I don't know if this is just me, but this type of analysis seems to be a theme of the ABC and other outlets where politics is merely some sort of sport of spectacle instead of something that is there to change people's lives. Maybe it's just me.
Trump is the spectacle, right? I mean, a politician could just spend their whole life being a commentator on Trump. Albo could get up every day and commentate on what Trump said today. Some fall into that trap, of course. Albo hasn't.
Yeah, but like my reflection of that though is the show is called Insiders. Like that is, it's not supposed to be, mainstream issues that voters care about. It is quite literally, a look inside the bubble that is journalists in the press gallery. I think that the other thing I would also say is this is why it's really important to have a communication strategy beyond the media. I think that it's really important to make sure that you are, one, talking to people directly, have a good social media platform, and, making phone calls and knocking doors. But to add to David's point, I also think if you really want the journalism that covers what the government is actually doing, you're going to have to watch the commercial networks that are running things like Metro Tunnel and what it means for people in Melbourne.
Here.
On that, good job. Good job on you, Jessie. On that, what Lucas said, it resonated with me because, I don't watch Insiders that much anymore anyway, but the times I have seen David Spears interview a politician, could be Conservative or it could be Labor, he kind of gives them maybe 10 seconds to talk about their kind of key line or lines or things that they want to get out. And you can see when it starts to give him the shits and he wants to get on things that he wants to talk about because he does this sort of tick. He goes, he's looking to try to get in and go, all right, yeah, fine, okay, you got your lines, but I want to talk about things that I want to talk about, which makes me ask the question then, like, if you're the Prime Minister, you'd be like going, mate, do you want me to come on your show or not? There's got to be a 50-50 kind of deal here. Let me talk about the things I want to talk about for half the interview, and then we can talk about things that you want to talk about for half the interview. And if we're not going to do that, I'm not going to come on the show.
It's not an interview, it's a contest. That's the thing, right? I mean, David Spears is very good at it, but what he will want to do is he'll have in his mind a mistake or an awkward conversation he can trigger, and then he will just zero in on that. That's why sometimes you see him ask the same question over and over and over again, because he'll want the politician to eventually engage and stumble.
He's phenomenal at it. He's trying to create a Clark and Daw interview. That's what he's trying to do. That's his objective.
Haven't we all seen it like a million gazillion times though? Like it's, you know, I don't know. It's
and then in that
he's
case,
good at it, but there's only so many Yes Minister episodes you can watch.
I know, but why? I mean,
they're good, but I have seen it 85 million times.
In this post-Trump era, where you could basically say whatever you like, it doesn't really matter. If David was doing that, I'd go, yeah, sure, David fucked up. What are you going to do about it? Can we move on to the next question? No, you got me. Next.
Media advisors across the world have just shuddered at that response.
Yeah.
Well, do you know what I mean? But I mean, like Trump does it all the time. Like he just changes his mind all the time, and all these other politicians are trying to stick to these old rules when they don't mean anything anymore. Also, no one's watching Insiders. Jessie, would you, if you were the advisor to the PM, would you say go on Insiders?
I would be very particular about the episodes that the Prime Minister was going on. That is fair.
It's not like he's a regular.
For instance, you did see the former Premier Andrews, on Insiders once every 4 years.
Yeah, the day after we won in a landslide.
Always looking a little seedy.
It'd have been a late night.
Well, that's going to get a front page in the Herald Sun. All right.
Let's delivered some phenomenal lines on that too. Anyway, go on.
Yeah. Let's go to the Melbourne Ingra In Over My Head Award. We have a couple of nominations, but before I go to them, does anyone else have any that you want to throw out there? Okay. First one is from actually, I don't know who this is from, but anyway, Colin Boyce, In Over My Head. And when it got sent to me, I was like, who the fuck is Colin Boyce? I had to Google it. Does anyone know who Colin Boyce is?
We have been out of the country. We haven't been that far out of the country.
Well, he's part of the Boyce family.
No, this is an example of David's. Every time some power broker in the right comes up, you have to Google them to work out who they are.
Well, apparently Colin challenged the Nationals leader David Littleproud during the week.
Yeah, he did.
That's right.
He did.
Yeah, right. That guy. Yeah.
Colin.
Like I said, it's boring. I can see.
See, I don't think
members of the National Caucus are going, who the fuck is Colin Boyce? And their caucus isn't that big.
What's his seat?
I don't know. He doesn't know.
So the only thing, can I just pull up a little bit? I do think that Colin Boyce was doing exactly what he wanted to achieve with that vote. He did not think he was going to end up being leader of the Nationals. He was registering a protest about the cuts to staffing and cars.
He's like, what happened to all my stuff? Where's all my stuff?
And to be fair to Colin, Littleproud is now meeting with Susan Ley. Maybe the stuff's coming back.
Trying to get the stuff back. Guys, I'm trying to get our stuff back.
Argue. Colin's nailed it. Colin has done exactly what he set out to do.
Well, maybe he wasn't over his head.
If it was this expensive, I'd have never embarked on this.
I think he might be a genius.
This other nomination comes from Andrew, the ACT Liberals and the Greens for proposing a coalition to bring down the ACT Andrew Barr Labor government. Greens leader, backstory here is Greens leader Shane Rattenberry and Liberals leader Mark Parton confirmed that they'd been discussing a potential power sharing arrangement, but it got scuttled had to go to Greens members vote. All six of them turned up at a pub in
I wish they'd done it. Imagine the carnage. I mean, not good for ACT Labor, I get that.
Yeah.
But taking one for the team, because the Greens would rise up and slaughter their own all across the country.
Yeah, I think that even Andrew Barr was hoping it would happen for the good of the country.
Like, Andrew, I've been doing this job for so long. So successfully too.
Imagine if I ended my career by saving the Labor Party from the Greens for eternity.
Yeah. Win.
Yeah.
Definite win.
Probably unanswerable questions. These are mine. Will there be a by-election in Nepean?
Well, it sort of depends.
It depends if there's a job.
That's my second probably unanswerable question. Will Sam Groth get a job?
Well, I'm willing to hire him.
I think he's been very clear that he will not create a by-election, and I think we have a clip of that.
Yep. Let's play this.
Sam Groth is denying that he's quitting Parliament before the state election for a new job. That's because he doesn't have a new job, at least not yet.
I think anybody who is leaving any job would be having those conversations, but as I stand here right now, there is a 0% chance of me causing a by-election in Nepean because I don't have a job on the table that I'm going to.
Not the firmest of commitments that he's staying put. Brett McLeod, 9 News.
All right. It's not exactly 100%
clear.
He's not going to create a by-election unless he gets a job and then he does.
I think that it was very clear. He will not create a by-election unless he gets a job.
This is part of this is a Liberal team. This is on the cusp of victory, isn't it? Like morale's high, cohesion's high, coaching's strong. Like this goes to my point. He's just another idiot Liberal, and for the sake of the country, find some who can read and write.
And he was a star candidate. Everyone was like, "This is the new Liberal Party. This is how we start our resurgence in Victoria." As Sam Groth, I remember The Age and others frothing over Groth's appointment.
Grothfroth.
It was Grothfroth.
The other probably answerable question I have is, will Labor's Peter Malinauskas have a bigger win at the South Australian election next month than Mark McGowan's win in WA in 2021? And I'll just remind you of what the primary statewide and two-party preferred was for WA. And I actually fell off my seat when I went back and checked and going, that can't be right. Primary vote, 59.92%. Two-party preferred, 69.7%. Can Mallee and South Australian Labor beat that?
I mean, this just goes to one of the themes of today's episode, which is, the Liberal Party need a Bex and a lie down, don't they?
I think the theme of this episode is, given how much I've Googled during it, that maybe I was not as prepared for it as I'd hoped.
That's just standard operating procedure for some of us. Here we go. So Ian Lawrence running for Enfield.
And there's no other he's a great candidate. He might also be Don's son-in-law.
Lawrence Ben.
Oh, okay.
Great candidate. Great candidate.
Yeah, great candidate.
No, he is. Fantastic. Friend of the show. Absolutely.
He is a good candidate. Both of those things could be true.
Yeah,
they are.
He's not good. The Liberal Party looked at him and gone, nah, he's a complete package, not running.
The Tories have taken one look at this guy, Ian Lawrence, walking around with Mallee and said,
Lawrence Ben.
Get
his name right.
Oh, right. I'm misreading it here. Sorry. Yeah. Anyway, there you go. So that goes to your point, Stephen.
It does. And then the last category is the Alexander Downer Political Judgment Award, but I think that's clearly the Liberal Party. They win it this month, based on all of the rants that we've had today. I have no specific example because this whole episode is being dedicated to that, unless anyone else has got any other Alexander Downer Political Judgment Award nominees.
No, I'm pleased to say I don't. I did listen to an interview Alexander Downer did last week, and it's 40 minutes of my life I'm never getting back, and I wish I could.
Why did you do that?
Because I thought he might say something interesting, and I should have known better. It was really just a whole lot of right-wing banalities from the global right-wing ecosystem. There was no insights of consequence at all.
There you go.
That's shocking.
Now, I have to report that but since our last episode, I got a phone call from Tony Burke, who is a listener of the
pod. You know we're putting this out, right?
Yes, I do. And Tony's a listener.
Other cabinet members, you're just going to release the private correspondence?
I told him I was going to say this. Just hold your horses. I'm sorry no one interesting rings you. I'll try and ring you more often.
I try and keep them confidential.
Tony rang me and listened to our last podcast, and God bless him, does listen to our podcast, so thank you. And I have to correct the record because Tony pointed out to me that in one of my remarks I was uncharacteristically hasty, and I said that Palestinian refugees from Gaza had come into Australia unvetted, and he pointed out to me rather, assertively as Tony can, that was absolutely wrong, and that they had been vetted by ASIO, they'd been vetted by Israel, they had entered Australia from Jordan via Israel, and other agencies had vetted them too. And he made it clear to me that he was not in the business and this government was not in the business of bringing the people into this country unvetted. So I unreservedly retract and clarify my remarks. And thank you, Tony, for ringing.
Very good. Look at that.
Yeah, you see, the problem with this is, which I deeply respect what you just did, David, is that I suspect all of the unchecked things I have said are now going to be corrected. It's going to be like an avalanche of phone calls.
We're going to have to add a new category at the end.
Just
David's apologies.
Correct the record.
Mate, the show will double in length if you go with a David's apologies.
Yeah. All these Tories will be calling you up this week going, oh, David.
David, I can read and write.
Colin Bice is definitely going to call us.
Yeah, Colin. I don't even know who Melbourne is.
I am genuinely pleased to hear that, though. That's good.
That's good. Good job. Thank you, Tony, and keep up the good work. Right. That is the end of the episode. Before we go, next week is a mailbag episode with Lizzie Ratcliffe and Todd Pinkerton. David, thank you so much for your contribution today. Great to see you again.
You too.
Jessie, once again, thank you very much for your contribution.
Thanks, Stephen. Really, really appreciate you having me on your show.
Thank you to all of our Patreon subscribers for sending in your category nominations this week. Excellent. Really enjoyed the conversation. And make sure you tell everyone to listen to the show. And go Pats. Hey, Social Democrats. Thanks for listening. Today's episode was hosted by myself, Stephen Donnelly, and produced by Grace Eyre. If you like the show, please rate us and review us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you really like the show, then join our Patreon community for early and ad-free access to each episode. We regularly take questions and comments from our Patreon members, so get in there if you want to have your say. And finally, get all the latest updates and bonus content by following Socially Democratic on our social media channels. The links are in our show notes. See you next Friday.